Hello everyone. This is a video I've wanted to do for quite a while. Normally I try to make my videos funny, or at least have something that will make you forcibly exhale through your nose, but considering the subject matter, this will probably be a lot more dry than my usual stuff. I really want to stress that carrying first aid equipment will not help you at all if you don't know how to use it. That's why I highly encourage you to take a Stop the Bleed course. They will give you the knowledge that you need to correctly use the components I discuss in this video. If you haven't taken one, please go to stopthebleed.org, click on Get Trained, and click on Find a Course. Many of the courses are completely free, and if there aren't any available near you, there is a free online course you can complete in under 30 minutes. What are my qualifications? Why should you listen to me, a weird, detached voice on the internet? I've been to 3 separate combat lifesaver courses while I was in the US Army, and I've taken several Stop the Bleed courses as well. I am not a doctor, none of this is medical advice, and this is not a first aid course. I am just a guy with some slightly more than advanced first aid classes under his belt, who likes being prepared and who builds out first aid kits for fun. These are mostly just suggestions and what I personally carry every day. Also, I am not being sponsored by Stop the Bleed, North American Rescue, or any of the other companies listed in this video. I think this is incredibly important information that could potentially save your life or the lives of your loved ones, and I really want to get that out there to you all. Okay, with all of that said, this is the first aid kit I carry in my bag every day. Inside it, we have a tourniquet, which is carried outside of this bag for ease of access. An emergency trauma dressing. Gloves. Hemostatic gauze. Wound packing gauze. A set of chest seals. A Mylar blanket. And compressed gauze. I think the tourniquet is the most important part of the kit. If you're only going to carry one thing from a first aid kit on your person every day, it should be a tourniquet. When the US Army started issuing tourniquets as part of individual first aid kits during the global war on terror, the number of deaths from extremity hemorrhaging dropped by 87%. The tourniquets I recommend are the North American Rescue CAT tourniquet or the Tactical Medical Solutions Soft T. Both have been approved by the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, or COTC, and both are simple to use. I know I said this wasn't a first aid video, but knowing how to correctly apply a tourniquet is super important, so I wanted to include a quick tutorial here. This only applies to windlass style tourniquets, and the instructions are slightly different for the CAT tourniquet, but they're similar enough that this information will still be helpful. Identify if the injury requires the use of a tourniquet. Pass the tourniquet up the limb, placing it 2 to 3 inches away from the injury, between the injury and the heart. On the soft tourniquet, you can optionally undo the buckle and pass the free end underneath the limb. Ensure that the tourniquet is as tight as possible. On the soft tourniquet, this can be easily done by checking if the slack indicator is visible. The slack indicator is the triangle sewn in beneath the windlass. Rotate the windlass in one direction until bleeding has stopped. The tourniquet will become very tight. Maintain windlass tension by placing it into the retention clip. On the CAT, you can now secure it down with the Velcro strap, and on the soft, you can use the tri-ring. Write the time you applied the tourniquet either on the tourniquet, or if there is no place to write it, plainly visible on the patient. I also like the Snakestaff Systems ETQ because of how small it packs down, and the fact it has a QR code on it which you can scan with your phone that shows a video on how to apply a tourniquet. However, it has not been approved by COTC, and if this is your first IFAK, I think you'd be better off keeping proven tourniquets in your kit. Now, I do not recommend either the RATS or the SWAT T tourniquets. The RATS requires precise application to ensure that it will function as intended, and if not performed properly, could result in tissue damage. And the SWAT T is made out of rubber, which is difficult to apply effectively when your hands are wet. For example, when they're covered in blood. You can theoretically use the SWAT T on top of a bandage to apply extra compression to it, but you probably would be better off just including an extra bandage in your first aid kit.
Be sure when applying tension not to allow the diamonds within the ovals to become squares within circles.
I also keep a Sharpie either with the tourniquet or in my bag that I carry. This is for writing the time I applied the tourniquet either on it or on the patient. This information is useful to the EMTs, surgeons, or anyone down the line that will be interacting with the patient. I remember hearing in the old days that if you applied a tourniquet, that the limb you applied it to would need to be amputated, or that you had to loosen a tourniquet every 10 minutes to preserve the limb. That is not true. If someone has a gunshot wound or stab wound or any kind of injury that sustained pressure will not solve, just slap a tourniquet on it. I would also like to note that you cannot tourniquet someone's neck. This will just kill them. Tourniquets should only be used on the limbs. Please just only use tourniquets on limbs. Gloves. The purpose of these gloves is to keep blood from other people from getting on or in you. People have all kinds of gross stuff in their blood, and you probably do not want that stuff inside your blood. Also, make sure you get gloves that fit. It really sucks pulling gloves out of your first aid kit only to realize that they're entirely too small to fit your hands, or that they'll just slide off instantly. This is an emergency trauma dressing. It's basically just a really big bandage. They make them in all kinds of sizes and shapes. There's also a version called an Israeli bandage that is capable of applying pressure. Basically, whatever will fit in your IFAK, put it in there. They're usually inexpensive and you can get several. Oh, I want to add a note here. Please do not buy life-saving equipment off of Amazon. Most of this stuff you can get directly from the manufacturer, be it North American Rescue, TacMed Solutions, Quick Clot, Rescue Essentials, whatever. Hemostatic gauze. This is a gauze that is used for packing wounds and stopping bleeding. There are several kinds, but the kind I carry is made by Quick Clot, and it is kaolin based, which means that you can safely use it on everybody. I also carry wound packing gauze, which is sterilized gauze intended for that purpose, and compressed gauze. You can use any of them for the purpose of wound packing, but the hemostatic or wound packing versions will have the best effect and are going to be easiest to pack into a wound due to how much denser they're woven together. When you're performing wound packing, the goal is to push a bunch of absorbent material into the wound to do two things: absorb blood and provide pressure on the veins and arteries in the wound to stop bleeding. And just for clarification, you do not want to perform wound packing on the head or torso. If you are trying to do wound packing on a head injury, you're probably pushing stuff into the brain, and I shouldn't need to say why that is bad. And on the torso, there are a lot of squishy things in there that will just get out of the way and won't allow the wound packing gauze to provide enough pressure. In any of those instances, sustained pressure with a bandage is the best option to stop bleeding. Editing Zach here. I just wanted to quickly state that wound packing is slightly complex and kind of outside the scope of this video. Again, I highly suggest that you take a Stop the Bleed course, and they should be able to point you in the direction of more in-depth training if that is something you're interested in. Speaking of chest injuries, that is what the chest seals are for. They're effectively an adhesive plastic sheet that will stop air from entering the lungs through a puncture wound. They can be used on the neck, chest, and abdomen. They're not designed to stop bleeding, but they can and will prevent air from filling the chest cavity. You may be wondering why there's a Mylar blanket in there. When someone loses a lot of blood, they can very easily become hypothermic. Mylar blankets are really good at reflecting heat, and they weigh basically nothing and take up very little space, so I always make sure to add one to my kit. Because it would really suck to successfully apply a tourniquet, do perfect wound packing, and then die because you were too cold. I also carry a small separate kit that I call a boo-boo kit, and this is for stuff that isn't really bad enough to warrant the stuff in the main kit. It has things like band-aids, wound sealing gel, ibuprofen, migraine medicine, lip balm, etc. Oh, and the Swiss Army knife with nail clippers on it. These things are a godsend, and they're like $30. You can even get just the small nail clippers for $15, and then you can actually bring those onto airplanes. This is the medical kit I keep in the glove box of my car, and it has basically the same stuff as the IFAK I carry daily, with the exception of a few extras. The whole thing is in a Mystery Ranch RFAK pouch, which keeps it all neatly organized and very compact. This is a strap cutter and window breaker that is made by Gerber. In the event that you're performing emergency first aid on someone, it is very likely that they will have clothes on, since we are humans and we like to wear those. Clothes have a tendency to get in the way of performing first aid, or even just seeing what the extent of the injuries are. If you're thinking, well, I just carry a pocket knife, I'll use that to remove the clothes before wound packing. Congratulations, you have now accidentally introduced another stab wound to the patient because your body is going through a massive adrenaline dump, your hands were covered in blood, and your dull-ass pocket knife slipped on their blue jeans. It is Easier and cheaper to include medical shears or a strap cutter. Both of them are designed not to cut a person unless you just shove a body part into them. These are wound closure bandages, which are excellent for closing lacerations that are too large for a band-aid, but not large enough to require wound packing. You can use them once you've stopped the bleeding with enough pressure. They're not necessary, but they're nice to have. Tape. It tapes things down. That's pretty much what it does. Now we're kind of getting into the stuff that you don't need to carry, and I generally don't advise people to carry unless they have had the training for it. But for the sake of showing what I have included in my med kit, I've kept them here in the video. This is a nasopharyngeal airway, or NPA. In the event that someone has undergone massive hemorrhaging, it is very likely that they will pass out. When they pass out, it is possible for their tongue to slide back into their throat, blocking their airway. The NPA helps prevent that. You can get them lubricated or with a lubricant pack, and they are used by inserting them into the nose of the patient. As someone who has had an NPA applied to them during training, I can tell you that it is very unpleasant, and if you approach a patient with an NPA and they do not try to stop you, they are either unconscious and you should apply it to them, or they have no idea what is in store for them. It's not fun. This is a chest decompression needle. Again, if you do not know how to use one of these, I do not recommend putting one into your kit. This is for when someone has a sucking chest wound and air has become trapped between their chest and lungs, preventing them from being able to breathe. You're basically punching a small straw into their chest, which allows the air that is not in their lungs but inside their chest to escape, hopefully allowing them to breathe properly again. I want to state again, I do not recommend including these last two items unless you have had the necessary training. Most of the items I've discussed here can be purchased online from various retailers and even directly from stopthebleed.org. I highly recommend getting a bleeding control first aid kit, even if it's just a tourniquet, and keeping it in your home, in the car, at your office, or taking one with you in some capacity if you're out and about. I also really want to emphasize, please take some type of bleeding control course, whether that's through Stop the Bleed or if your country has an officially certified course. Simply having the medical equipment will not help you if you don't have the knowledge on how to use it. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I hope this knowledge helps you, and I sincerely hope that you never need to use it. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.